Today, we're talking about a mushroom that has a truly legendary reputation, one that stretches back for millennia. In ancient texts, it was hailed as a superior herb, and now it's a staple in modern wellness. But what's the real story here? Let's dig in and separate the legend from the lab results.
You know, one of its ancient Japanese names is Manentake, which translates to the 10,000-year mushroom. You don't just get a name like that for nothing, right? It tells you right away that this fungus carries a deep, deep history of reverence and this profound promise of longevity.
And that reverence, that's where we're going to start. Before we get into any of the modern science, we really need to understand why reishi was held in such high esteem for centuries. I mean, it even earned it another nickname, the mushroom of immortality.
I mean, look at this timeline. It really puts the legacy into perspective. We're talking documented use for nearly 2,000 years, starting way back around 200 CE. Back then, finding reishi in the wild was so incredibly rare that it was often reserved exclusively for royalty. But now, you fast forward to today, and thanks to cultivation, it's pretty much accessible to everyone as a functional food.
Okay, so what were traditional healers actually using it for? Well, in traditional Chinese medicine, reishi wasn't seen as some kind of magic bullet for one single disease. It was all about making the body more resilient as a whole, promoting longevity, calming the spirit to help with things like anxiety and insomnia, and helping the body bounce back from chronic illness and fatigue. All right, so that's the legend. But what is actually inside this woody mushroom that could possibly explain all of these effects? Now let's pivot and look at the science, and we're going to start with a really key concept. So a term you're going to hear a lot is bioactive compounds. And put simply, these are just the active ingredients. Think of it like this. Caffeine is the bioactive compound in your coffee that wakes you up. Well, reishi has its own unique set of compounds that interact with our bodies.
And it turns out, reishi has three main groups of these powerhouse compounds. First up, you've got polysaccharides, which are pretty famous for how they affect the immune system. Then there are triterpenoids, which lab studies have linked to anti-inflammatory effects. And finally, you have these specific proteins that also talk directly to our immune cells. It's really this combination that makes it so interesting to scientists.
Okay, this brings us to a really, really important point about how these compounds work, especially when it comes to the immune system. We hear the term immune booster all the time, which is kind of like a simple light switch. It's either on or it's off. But a much more accurate term for what reishi might do is immune modulator. It's more like a smart thermostat, It can help turn the immune response up when you need it, but it can also help turn it down if it's overactive. It's a much more sophisticated kind of action. So, okay, we've got the ancient tradition on one side and some pretty promising lab science on the other. But what happens when we put it to the ultimate test? Actual human clinical trials. This is where we have to separate the hype from the reality.
Let's tackle a big one right out of the gate. A lot of people seek out reishi for support when they're going through cancer treatment. So, what does the highest level of evidence actually say about that?
So, a major Cochrane review, which is basically the gold standard for analyzing lots of studies, paints a really clear and nuanced picture. If you're looking at it as a standalone treatment to shrink tumors or improve survival, well, there's just no strong evidence for that. But, and this is a big but, when it's used with chemotherapy or radiotherapy, some trials suggest it might actually help improve patient response and even boost certain immune markers. So here's the absolute key takeaway on this. The evidence points to reishi being a potential supportive partner in cancer care, not a replacement for standard therapy. It's an adjunct, something you use alongside conventional treatment, never ever instead of it.
All right, let's switch gears. What about another huge area of claims? A lot of products market reishi for helping with metabolic health. We're talking things like blood sugar, blood pressure, and cholesterol.
Well, this is where the human data gets a lot less impressive. A key 16-week randomized controlled trial, which is the gold standard of research, put this to the test. And the result? Basically, nothing. No significant improvements for blood sugar control, blood pressure, or lipids when they compared it to a placebo. The evidence, for now, just isn't there to support those claims. Right, now this is super important. Just because something is natural, that doesn't automatically mean it's safe for absolutely everyone. We've got to look at the fine print because safety and potential side effects are just as important as any potential benefits.
Now, for most people, taking it for a short time is usually fine, but some mild side effects are relatively common. We're talking about things like dry mouth, some digestive upset, or maybe even skin rashes.
Okay, but this is the slide you really need to pay attention to. Reishi can interact with medications. It might increase your risk of bleeding, so that's a huge concern if you're on blood thinners. It could also have additive effects with blood pressure or diabetes drugs. And because it's an immune modulator, its effects in autoimmune conditions are totally unpredictable. Look, this part is non-negotiable. You absolutely have to talk to your doctor before even thinking about taking this stuff.
Whew, okay. So, we've journeyed from ancient Chinese medicine all the way to modern clinical trials. Let's try to bring it all together and get to the bottom line.
The scorecard really breaks it all down for us, right? For adjunct cancer care, the evidence is modest but potentially supportive. For general immune modulation, it's promising, but we definitely need more data. For metabolic health, the data is weak or even negative, and for fatigue, the evidence is still very, very preliminary.
And I have to leave you with one final and really critical point. The supplement market can be a bit of a wild west. Studies have shown that the contents of reishi products can vary wildly, and often they don't even match what's on the label. This means choosing a reputable, third-party tested brand isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely essential. So, after all that, where do we land with reishi? Is it a product of ancient wisdom, a subject for modern science, or is it this fascinating mix of both? The evidence suggests it's a powerful story of a traditional remedy being put under the microscope, and that's revealed a complex picture where promising potential exists right alongside some very clear limitations and, let's be honest, a lot of marketing hype. The real wisdom, it seems, is in knowing the difference.